Greetings, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Christopher Ladd. For those of you I haven't met, I'm the chair of the Guitar and Harp program here, and I'd like to welcome Benjamin Tin, who's our alumni guest lecturer today. Ben will go in just a moment, but if you'd be so kind as to make sure that your phones are either on silent or off. My pictures.
You can take pictures, please.
Pictures, but no flash would be great. And if you look at the back of your program, you'll see that the next Hartt School Guitar Program event is our next evening with Guitar and Harp, which is Thursday, March 6th, in this room at 7:30. So, without further delay, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Before we begin, a few things you should know about me. First is that I'm dealing with some sort of voice issue today. I'm not sure if it's a voice that's coming or going, so I'm going to try to talk as clear as I can. Second is that I'm a middle school teacher, so sometimes the language that I use is more pointed and less suited for academia. It doesn't mean I'm going to swear at you all, it just means that you might think, well, this guy doesn't know how to talk in front of a bunch of adults at a college, and that's right, I don't. So today, well, thank you for being here. I know it's snowing outside, and it's a lot that you're here. Today I'm going to talk about a piece of music that's very dear to me that I've been playing probably for about 3 years now. I've known it for a longer period of time. It's not some obscure piece in the guitar catalog. It's a pretty big piece. I'm going to talk about it in a couple different dimensions, and then I'm going to play it. And if we have time at the end, we can do a Q&A, or we can all go eat, or you can go home because it's snowing outside. So whatever you'd like. What I'm going to talk about is not exhaustive, right? So I'm going to do my best in about 30 minutes or so to give you a couple unique perspectives about this piece, in addition to some general information. But I could not imagine any piece really, especially a piece of this magnitude, to try to give you the beginning and the end in just 30 minutes time. So if there's anything that I skip over, I apologize. And call me on it, definitely call me on it. First, before I even flip to the next screen, we're going to define a word. And the word is Decamerón. The Decamerón, the word itself, is named after the Greek word deca, which is 10, and hameron, which is day, which literally translates to 10 days. The title refers to the 10 days of Giovanni Boccaccio's original book called The Black Decameron. That was a 14th century book, and it had 10 days spanning each of the characters. So it had 100 short stories, and then spanned over 10 days, okay? The reason that this word is important is it has nothing to do with the actual story of the piece that we're going to talk about, but it is a word that means a tome, a large book of stories over the course of 100 days. So now let's get into it proper. This guy's name is Brouwer. He was born in Cuba in March 1909. Very musical. He was raised in a musical family. Some famous relatives of his were Cuban music royalty. And in general, he loved all kinds of music, but he had a specific hatred for popular music, and really disliked the direction that it was going. In fact, he did like the popular culture, but it was the popular culture of the Afro-Cuban, especially the mysterious, the spiritual, the superstitious. So I'm going to read you a quote about him. This is from Gustavo Dudamel, who's the artistic director of the LA Philharmonic. The grandnephew of the famous Cuban pianist and composer Ernesto Decamerón, Leo Brouwer was born into a musical family and encouraged from early in his youth. He made his public debut on the guitar in 1955 and began to compose then as well. In 1959, he came to the U.S. to study guitar at the University of Hartford. See, that's a middle school trope. And composition at Juilliard, where his teachers included Vincent Rossetti and Stephen Wolf. Returning to Cuba, he began active work in film and music. He has scored over 50 films, including international hits such as 1992's Como Agua para Chocolate. In 1981, he was appointed principal conductor of the Orquesta Sinfónica Nacional de Cuba. Here's another bit of information about him from Brian Townsend, a Canadian guitarist. Brouwer is a complex figure. On one hand, he is anything but an aesthetic ideologue. His music draws from the structures and ideas of modernism and avant-garde, but also from Cuban and African folk music. He has created purely electronic music and at the same time done very lush settings and traditional lullabies. He has written film music such as the soundtrack to the movie, like Water for Chocolate, and also beautiful and instructive technical studies for the guitar. So we're learning right now that he is not just one-trick pony. Brouwer does a lot. Those little red numbers at the bottom of there signaling me which note to read. A very, very brief history of Cuba. Before it was colonized by the Europeans, it was inhabited by a small number of native tribes, the Tainos and Chimneys, as well as a few others. Cuba was invaded and colonized, and their main export was sugar because of how hot it was. The sugar crop grew very well. This part of the story is not unique to Cuba. This is unique to basically any country that was colonized in this part of the world. Over the next generations, you had the remaining indigenous people that were there. You had the Europeans who had come in and actually settled, and then you also had the African slaves themselves as well as the descendants of slaves. So we know that we can look at many countries like that, Jamaica, Haiti, countries in Latin America, where over years and years these cultures start to mesh together and become an amalgamation of many different cultures, which I think is one of the beautiful things that blossoms out of something as evil as slavery. Cuba in general has always been struggling for its independence, even now. Really good podcast if you're interested in this topic by a man named Nick Ramos. The podcast is called The History of the Cuban Revolution. Really good podcast on Spotify. Excuse me. But Cuba's had all these tumultuous, we're going to get together and create this political coalition. We're going to try to work with the government, even before Castro, like since its inception of a national European colony. It's been like that. Okay, now we go to this guy. Quasi-controversial figure. His name is Leo Frobenius. He was born in Germany. And did I leave him being racist though? Yeah, see, that's it. That's the middle school teacher coming out. He's a big racist. Yeah, that's what I wrote, because he was. So this guy's a self-taught anthropologist, ethnologist, whatever you want to call it. He did a lot of really controversial things. He did some actually really wonderful things, and then also some really nasty things as well. Wrote a lot of books, spent a lot of time in Africa documenting art. Right, so let me just grab my notes on Mr. Frobenius. He was a German ethnologist and archaeologist, known for his work in African cultures. One of the great things he did was he preserved a lot of the oral traditions that were otherwise specifically passed on orally. So songs, rhythms, folk tales, legends, documented those and brought them back to Europe. He also promoted a lot of African cultural achievement. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Frobenius argued that African societies had a deep cultural history and artistic tradition worthy of local recognition. But at the same time, he had a very racist attitude, despite all of these advocations for Africa and African history. His writings very often reflected European superiority in ways that were not arguable. So just our society is better, period. Didn't quite get the Enlightenment Okay, why is this important? Well, Leo Brouwer, remember, interested in Afro-Cuban mythology, spirituality, skepticism, mysticism, not very interested in modern, popular Cuban music. Said, I want to learn about my own history, being an Afro-Cuban person myself. And so he dives into this world of information, stories, legends, folk tales. And the Black Decamerón, this book, I think I have a picture of it right here. No, I don't. I'll show it to you when it comes out. It's an actual book by Leo Fernandez called The Black Decamerón, a series of stories and folk stories and songs and these things, that artistic fragments that he had pulled from the oral tradition of African cultures. Leo Brouwer was very inspired by this work, and so he said, instead of just taking something from this book and adapting it to music, I'm going to write my own 3 stories. So what you're going to hear tonight are 3 stories inspired by African folktale, set to music on the classical guitar. It was commissioned in 1981 for solo classical guitar for a woman named Sharon Isbin, who is a fantastic guitar player, still alive, still around, still teaching. And we're going to hear these 3 stories. The first one is called El Arpa del Guerrero, or UHartt, La Huida de los Amantes por el Valle de los Echoes, The Flight of the Lovers through the Valley of Echoes, La Balada de la Doncella Enamorada, The Ballad of the Love-Struck Maiden. Well, there's a current cultural significance about the Negro. The themes of heroism, love, African mythology, direct connection to Cuban cultures, African heritage, right? Because it's very easy as us, as people who don't live in that area, to say those people are Cuban. But remember, when you live in such a small area with such a compact and rich historical ethnology and perhaps, you have a lot of stuff that goes into who you are. There's also a global perspective, resonates with universal themes of love, struggle, and heroism. So now we actually talk about the fun bits. How are we doing so far? Good? Okay. You have to realize, as a middle school teacher, I can't see 3 words without getting interrupted. So I'm like, everyone's quiet, they hate it. So we have the stylistic elements of the Black Decamerón. In general, across all 3 movements, we could say that these highlight what you're going to hear. A big influence of Cuban, folk, and African music, and we hear that through rhythmic complexity and syncopation. We have modernist techniques, which include dissonance, aleatoric elements, like put that in scale chords, I'll come back to that in 1 second, extended guitar techniques, folk influence, the use of modal scales and traditional storytelling through music. Guitar techniques, specifically use of harmonics, glissandi, percussive tapping on the guitar body. Aleatoric music is music that is random or has a certain bit of chance involved. I put it in scare quotes because when you read the score of the music, there's really nothing random or chance about it. It's very scripted, prescriptive about what he wants you to do. But to the listener, it can have that effect. It's not rolling dice. John Cage. The first movement is called The Warrior's Heart. The warrior's inner conflict between love and duty is the main theme. Sharon Isbin, in her program notes, when the piece premiered, said, the first movement contrasts dynamic and rhythmic passages with lyrical moments. The warrior is banished because he is taken up playing the harp, but he returns to lead his people into battle when invaded. After his victory, he is condemned to exile again, but escapes with his lover. You gotta have your harp and your lover. Opening harp-like arpeggios evoke peaceful contemplation. There's a use of wide intervals of plucked harmonics to depict the warrior's nobility and solitude. Gradual increase in tension through rhythmic intensification and just general modulation. This is our first opening statement. You're going to hear it when I play it. It's declarative. It outlines an octave. For those of you that are not familiar with this many ledger lines, that's an E. This is also an E. That's an E up there too. What does that spell? E. It also establishes a tempo at the beginning of this piece, and establishes the odd time signature, which is 5/8. And it is somewhat ambiguous or agnostic to tonality until we get the G sharp, which would make that chord what, folks? An E major in the next bar. Sorry, it's too much. We continue this mysterious harp-like texture on the guitar. Harmony consisting two major chords, a tritone apart, is one way to look at it. There's many different ways to understand this piece. Throughout the first movement, we get a lot of, I believe, but maybe this is, I'm not attributing a music theorist might say something different. I believe that the contrasting times where we will see two chords a tritone apart, or two things like a major minor chord, which we'll get to later. I wonder if that is a sense of dualism or a sense of dual identity, as we're talking about two different ideas coming together. This is certainly the statement of the lawyer. The guitar-like harp is something that is very interesting to Brouwer. He writes about that too. This is from an interview. Unlike the homophonic style, the style of Segovia, liked most, and that which induced the creation of the works by Torvald, Ponce, Rodrigo, and so forth, my way of composing is close to what I like to call the guitar harp. The guitar harp is a guitar orchestra in which all the orchestral compositional elements are closer to the orchestra than to that of the guitar's traditional cliches. I always use the guitar harp, a resonant guitar. I try to avoid the percussive or melodic guitar. The basic harmonies I use when they are simple chords are chords that rest obeying the law of opposing forces. Kind of the idea what I was saying. These harmonies involve small, I can say even miserable thematic materials. 4 foolish notes give me the pretext to compose a work of big dimensions. The melody was the queen of the music for a long time, a thing that doesn't happen now. My harmonic language is based on the extensive use of the sound spectrum. So keep that in mind. The idea of these 4 foolish notes, or in this case 2 foolish notes, any note that approaches the E, comes back to conclude the first statement, and that's going to happen several times throughout the first movement. I don't know, the rest of the A section is just a warrior's theme that develops it. There are continuously tritone major chord harmonization, followed by a single line throughout. And by the way, there's a ton of first movement left, but I only have so much time. Movement 2, the flight of the lovers through the valley of the echoes. Theme, the escape of the lovers running through a landscape filled with echoes. Musical themes, fast running motifs symbolizing the flight. Echoes, affected on the guitar with repeated notes and phrases at different dynamic volumes. Fast scale runs, dynamic contrast, repeated note patterns. This is really the aleatoric-esque stuff. Here are 4 foolish notes again at the beginning. Remember our word children? E, I'm sorry, I have it. E, again, we have these opening E's, a D sharp. As you will hear it when I play it, I really try to bring out the fact that D sharp is not E. It's almost like we're stretching a vertical silly cutting, but not quite getting to the tip where we need it. It happens in the same phrase, the second phrase in the same way, and eventually we go all the way to the top. And then there's another moment too where we get those notes. I don't like playing this part. That's what I'm trying to do. So you guys can just sing in your head, okay? You're going to see this is something really incredible that he does. So similar to how the E major section opened with an E, and this is the second movement, here's our opening line, right? All the way on the left. We have an octave E, and it's something that almost gets to E. The interval is the major seven. We have the same thing that happens here in rehearsal mark C. That is the first marching of the numbers, the first galloping of the bars. You'll see that we have the signal A going to G sharp, so in a slightly different tonal section. Same idea. And then this section gets louder and faster as it's repeated several times. Oh. We gotta just hit the next button. This is where we get the repeated section, and why we say is the valley of echoes, because you're going to get a statement like this, and which is the opening statement, D sharp, again in the bottom section. You have this stretched out major seven along 3 octaves, and then for my non Italian reading folks, subito means quickly or suddenly, quiet and smooth. So we have something loud and percussive, intense, and then it dies off. And so that creates an effect of loud and echo. And we get that multiple times throughout the section. He uses that on the guitar, he does that on the guitar, he uses something called PMI arpeggio, where you play based on the thumb and the middle and index finger on the other strings. That is continued. Here, movement number 3, the ballad of the love-struck woman. Represents longing and affection. Musical themes, lyrical and emotive melodies representing the maiden's love. Use of melodic embellishments and subtle harmonic changes to express tenderness, a slow expressive theme that contrasts with the energetic radius movements. I had a different message to say about this third movement. It's just beautiful. We could talk about how he composes it, and it is in rondo form, where we have a theme and then it keeps coming back to that theme. But when you listen to this piece and we play this piece, it's just beautiful. There's really few compositional tricks or gimmicks in there. More melody starts at the upbeat from the previous measure, transposed throughout the key. We get that a lot. So here's our intro. Again, similar to the 4 foolish notes idea, we started with open E's, and now we're going to center around the D note. But it's not as convincing. I'm not sure if I would say that. I'm not sure if I would say that it's the same exact thing. So our melody comes here. A, B, A, G, F. And then we're going to get that throughout what shall I mass? Oh, cool. We'll get that again at the bottom as it's developed, and then we'll get it into G. We have a very lively B section that happens after, fast and tricky. And I like to play the partiture, so just I'm sure this will be enough. Before we examine the similarities between opening, rhythm, motifs, motives, if you will. Here's our intro, where we have one note playing on one string and the same note playing on the next open string. And we create same note, different note, same note, same note, same note. I'll say the letters of D, D, C, D, 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 C, D, D. And then we have a similar idea. Again with the 4 foolish notes idea. He does not bury his inspiration anywhere. This is from the opening. This is 3 pages of the piece. The B section is from the opening. We have a low G, 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 F, G, G, G. And that takes us through the piece. And then it gets hard as more iterations. That's the hard one right there. Right, Chris? Oh wait, there's more. We bring it again to a low D, beautiful section. And when you isolate just the melody, just the melodic notes, you realize that as complicated as it sounds, especially when you're listening to it, the very simple, pretty melody that's happening. F, E, D over a G bass, D, C sharp, E over a G bass, C, E, and A over a D bass. D flat, D natural over a D treble voice is the inverted one. So, I have one more note for you guys before I finish up. In general, the way that he uses this, if we're talking about like a strictly materialistic point of view, like what is in this stuff, is very simple compositionally. There's polyrhythms, right? The simplest way when it's on the nose schoolers is that a polyrhythm is just when you play one rhythm at one time and another at another time. And then those one goes in a circle, you repeat it, the other one goes in a circle, and it's the rhythm that happens when you put those two together. So we get that effect, that set of rhythmic idea. We have lots of syncopation, the accenting, of weak beats and adding rhythm, drive, and dynamicism. We also have some really simple forms here. Sonata form for the first movement. We have an A, B, A movement for form for the second movement, and then we have a rondo form for the last movement. I think what makes this piece really special is that Brouwer just understands the guitar and understands his voice. And he is composing this piece at a point of his career where he is comfortable with some of the really weird stuff. There's a couple pieces that I can recommend afterward that are not as easy to talk about. The intro silence right there. So summary, stylistic fusion of Afro-Cuban culture and modern classical music. Evocative storytelling through guitar techniques and musical themes, and the universal and timeless appeal of Brouwer's Decamerón. I think it's because it's so accessible. I mean, who doesn't love a good love story, right? Rom-coms. Brouwer's work not only honors his Cuban roots, but also contributes to the global classical guitar repertoire, bridging cultures and traditions. So, I'm going to play it for you now. And then, if we want to talk, we can talk, and if not, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to drink this water first, I'm sorry. Thank you so very much.